Good morning, and thank you for joining us. Welcome to our annual Louisiana Early Ed Month. My name is Dr. Libby Saunier, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Louisiana Policy Institute for Children, and I am thrilled to welcome all of you here today for our keynote. I'm also honored to recognize the title sponsor for Louisiana Early Ed Month 2026, Entergy. This event and this month would not be possible without the generous support we have received from Entergy and all of our sponsors and our donors. Now it is my pleasure to share with you all that Governor Jeff Landry has declared February 2026 as Early Ed Month in the state of Louisiana. His commitment to the state of Louisiana and its children is evident in the decisions he makes as he continues to support the early childhood community's efforts to increase investments in early childhood education. Thank you, Governor Landry, for proclaiming February 2026 as Early Ed Month again. At this time, it's my honor to introduce you all to the Louisiana State Superintendent of Education, Cade Brumley. Dr. Brumley has cemented the importance of early childhood education across the education continuum from birth in the Louisiana Department of Education and in our state to ensure our children receive a high-quality education so that a stronger Louisiana starts with successful children.
Thank you, Libby. And furthermore, just thank you so much for all the work that you and your team do, not just during Early Ed Month, but throughout the entire year. Thanks so much for you and the entire team. It is most appropriate that we're taking a whole month to celebrate early ed in the state of Louisiana. We are super excited about that. We know that early education, early childhood education specifically, is necessary for the future of the state of Louisiana as we continue to get stronger. We're most interested in making sure that every child can enter kindergarten ready on day one, and the work that you do and the work that leaders and teachers and directors and owners do is so very important. The goal here is very achievable. We can achieve it through collaboration with families, with other state agencies, with providers, and with communities. And that's to make sure that kids are entering kindergarten on day one ready for school. We all know from recent ratings that Louisiana students are just as capable as students anywhere in the country when they have the right resources to thrive. And thanks to the work of Louisiana Policy Center and others, we're making sure that that is happening in the state of Louisiana. It's my honor to be with all of you today, but even more so, it's my pleasure to introduce the 2026 Early Childhood Leader of the Year, who will kick off today's event. Devonda Whittington Warren of the Explore and Learn Early Learning Center in Tangi Parish has dedicated over 30 years to the field. She firmly believes that the early years from birth to age 5 are truly foundational for every child. And so it's my great pleasure to welcome this morning and have you all hear from Ms. Devonda Whittington Warren.
Thank you, Dr. Brumley. At this time when families across the country and Louisiana are working harder than ever to find high quality early childcare, today's conversation couldn't be more timely. Early childhood is no longer a side issue. It is central to family stability, work participation, and our economic future. Secretary Elizabeth Groginsky is a leader who understands that strong child care systems are built with families and providers, not around them, but with them. Her work reflects a deep respect for people closest to young children and her belief that their voices must shape policies. Under Secretary Groginsky's leadership, New Mexico did not just imagine a better child care system, they built one. By aligning and implementation, the state has made a meaningful progress toward universal child care, improving access to families and better wages for educators. I'm honored to be here today to introduce our keynote speaker, New Mexico's Secretary of Early Childhood Education and Care, Elizabeth Groginsky. With more than 30 years of experience in early child care, local, state, and national, Secretary Groginsky, in her tenure, has established New Mexico at the forefront of early childhood education by creating and achieving universal free full-day pre-K4 for 4-year-olds, increasing compensation for early child care professionals, and creating the most expansive child care assistance program in the nation. Before moving to New Mexico, Secretary Groginsky served as Assistant Superintendent for Early Education, Early Learning at the Office of the State Superintendent of Education in the District of Columbia. She has a distinguished track record as a leader and an innovator in early childhood. With that, I am proud to turn the program over today to Secretary Groginsky.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Devonda, for that wonderful introduction. I am absolutely thrilled to be here with the leaders across Louisiana celebrating Early Ed Month. I just want to thank you all for inviting me, and thank you for the work you do in Louisiana every day to strengthen education systems, support families, and build the conditions for children to thrive. I'm honored to be here to talk today about New Mexico's Universal Child Care Initiative. But I want to begin with kind of what Devonda just shared, is that childcare is not a side issue. This is a truth that we all know, everyone here on this call, and we need to make sure that people all over this country know that childcare is education, it's family economic security, it's workforce stability, and it's community well-being. When childcare is unreliable or unaffordable, it shows up everywhere. It shows up in chronic absenteeism. It shows up in teacher recruitment and retention. It shows up in labor force participation, especially for mothers. And it shows up in employers struggling to staff shifts. It shows up in family stress and in children carrying that stress into classrooms. So when we talk about universal, we're not just talking about a policy. We're talking about an infrastructure decision. In New Mexico, our goal has been to build a family-centered, universal, comprehensive early childhood system that delivers clear outcomes, and to build it in a way that stays strong and is sustainable over time. I do have to give so much credit to our incredible governor, Michelle Lujan Grisham, who brought this clear-eyed vision to the leadership of her administration in 2019. And what I want to share today is not a miracle, but a system building story. What we built, what we've learned, and what we would do again. And what lessons can we transfer to you in Louisiana and other states, whether you're in a place that's politically aligned, politically divided, highly rural, urban, or somewhere in between. We know that universal childcare, what I want to share is, it's not just a policy, one policy switch that we can all flip, but it's a system that you can build intentionally over time. Devonda mentioned that we have universal pre-K for 4-year-olds. We also have near universal pre-K for 3-year-olds. We have universal home visiting in every county, and we have a family infant toddler program, which is our Part C for infants and toddlers with developmental disabilities that has expansive eligibility. So we built a system that, again, puts families at the center and knows that early childhood care and education is an essential component of a well-being of children and families and of a state's economy. And for us, all this journey started long before the word universal ever appeared in a headline, and there have been many. And New Mexico's progress didn't just begin with Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, or one budget cycle, or one legislative session. It began with people building a shared case over years, advocates, lawmakers, business leaders, philanthropy, families, educators, committed partners who kept showing up year after year. And we had strong leadership from the executive branch. As I mentioned, Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham championed families and young children and held this concept, this notion of a unified, universal cradle-to-career education system as a guiding principle of her administration. because she understood early childhood as both education and economic infrastructure. Our department launched in July 2020, but it was built on years of groundwork and coalition building. About a decade earlier, advocates introduced legislation to better coordinate early childhood programs across our government. That bill didn't pass, but it did clarify some core problems. Early childhood was far too fragmented to scale the quality and access. A fragmented system means families have to navigate multiple systems that don't talk to each other. It means providers deal with inconsistent requirements, unstable funding, and paperwork that steals time away from children. It means policymakers can't see the full picture and can't steer the system towards outcomes. I don't know if this sounds familiar to you, but it's very familiar across our country. So our first big move was governance. Creating a unified early childhood agency truly made it possible to move from idea to execution. A unified governance structure aligned our programs, our goals, and our strategies under one roof. Instead of separate lanes with separate rules, we created a single place to drive system building across access, quality, the early childhood workforce, and accountability. This might all sound very structural, and it is, but it was also very practical. Because when you have unified governance, you can do what every state leader wants to do. Set clear goals, align your policy, your funding, your measurement to these goals, and you can actually deliver. And we did this all with stakeholders at the table: families, educators, childcare operators, and the business sector. Because if you want a system that people will trust, you need to build it with them. We also invested in listening as an implementation strategy. In early 22, once all the COVID restrictions were lifted, we went on Spring Tour 2022. I visited 20 communities to hear directly from early childhood stakeholders. Very much listened to childcare programs, but pre-K, home visiting, early intervention. And we've continued that roadshow approach. Whenever we are sharing ideas or launching big initiatives, we want to gather feedback directly from communities. New Mexico is a highly rural state. We're the 5th largest geography in the country. We only have 2 million people. We have 23 sovereign nations, pueblos, and tribes within our borders. So it's very important that we not create a one-size-fits-all. And it was important for us to help shape our policy. We were a new department. We had big goals and big ideas, and we couldn't do it from Santa Fe. We had to travel the state, and it made all the difference. It helped us identify what were the administrative barriers. It helped us understand what universal needed to meet, what universal would mean in a rural setting, in a tribal community, or in urban neighborhoods. And then we addressed the funding and the revenue crisis. In New Mexico, we chose a cost modeling approach to set our childcare reimbursement rates instead of relying on market rates. Here's the simple reason, which all of you probably know: market rates reflect what families can afford to pay, not the true cost of delivering high quality care. Families cannot pay what it actually costs to deliver that quality, especially for our infants and toddlers, where ratios are smaller, staffing is more intensive, and the economics are harder. Cost modeling captures what quality actually costs, the appropriate ratios, qualified staff, planning time, stable operations, and compensation. Key, the compensation that can recruit and retain educators. But I do want to emphasize something. Building the cost model and including the provider community in the process was a key element to our success. It's a requirement, of course, doing cost modeling, but we engage the provider community in focus groups, through interviews, through sitting on a task force that helped inform and help steer the ultimate results of that cost model. That helped us do two things. First, it grounded our rate setting in quality, so we weren't building policy and reimbursement rates on the status quo. Second, it created legitimacy and buy-in because the childcare providers could see their actual costs reflected in the work, and policymakers could defend the approach as evidence-based and transparent. Cost modeling became our North Star for building a system. one that connects what we ask providers to do with what it actually costs for them to do it well. Universal didn't happen overnight. In New Mexico, we took a phased approach, and we did three important things at the same time. So when we knew we were going to set our rates at the true cost of care, we knew it was important for those child care providers to have as many children in their facilities receiving that reimbursement rate. So we increased the eligibility. This helped us do two things, helped us relieve a lot of financial stress on more families in New Mexico. It helped us increase compensation for the workforce, and it helped stabilize and grow the child care sector. So starting in 21, we increased the reimbursement rates, expanded eligibility to 350% of the federal poverty level, and we waived co-payments for families up to 200%. But very quickly, we realized that our co-payment structure was out of, it had not been updated in a long time. So this showed how broken the market was. The co-pays for parents at those higher income levels were higher than what providers had been charging them. So in April 2022, we said, no, we have to expand eligibility even further to 400% FPL and waive co-payments for all eligible families, while retaining the requirement of work and school. This was vital. This helped us get, and at this point, through that expansion, 80% of New Mexico families with young children fell into that qualifying eligibility level. So it's not just a glowing statistic, but it's a system design choice and represents a paradigm shift. Because those steps raised revenues for providers while decreasing the financial burden on families, when we did these two things together, it truly changed the physics of the whole market. Providers had more predictable revenue for more of their families, so they could hire and plan. Families had more stability, so they could work and go to school and keep those routines. And quality improved because classrooms became more stable. In November, well, actually in September, the governor announced that we were going to start universal child care in New Mexico. No more income limits, no co-pays, starting November 1. And that's when we took the step. We removed those income limits. We built in expectations. We created two rates. We call the standard rate and an enhanced rate. For those programs that chose the enhanced rate, they had to commit to paying their entry-level staff, depending on their quality level, somewhere between $16 an hour up to $19 an hour. We also required them to be open 10 hours a day, 5 days a week. Again, this was an opt-in. This was not a requirement, but if providers wanted that even higher rate, we needed them to commit and opt into those. And I'm excited to share that about 38% of our providers have already done that. We also did this by staying anchored in the mixed delivery system. We have registered homes. They are licensed exempt. We have homes and large homes, and we have centers. And we make sure that all of this is voluntary. Providers do not have to opt into universal child care. Families don't have to opt into universal child care because parents choose where their children receive care, and providers choose, again, whether and how to participate. And that matters because families, as you all know, need options that reflect their culture, language, their geography, work schedules, their values, and their preferences. If you're wondering why we went universal, here's one of the clearest reasons. Our old eligibility limits didn't match the lived reality of working families. One data point that grounds us in this fact is that while 17% of New Mexico households are financially insecure by federal standards, 46% are struggling to afford basic needs. That gap is where many families live, working, contributing, trying, but still one disruption away from falling behind. We also know childcare costs are one of a family's highest monthly expense, often a barrier to accessing care and accepting or holding on to a steady job, achieving that financial stability, and so much more. So universal access is not only about serving more people, it's about addressing the cliff effect of means-tested programs. It's about reducing stigma and rewriting the narrative about what public programs are meant to achieve, a public good. It's about simplifying a system so families can actually use it. And it's about sending a clear message. Early childhood supports are for all families. because early childhood is the foundation of everything that comes next. An interesting data point: in our first 2.5 months of launching universal childcare, 44% of the families who came into the system were already eligible. I think that speaks to why universal is so important. People see it for them and for all of us. When we moved to universal, again, we paired that expanding access with a rate approach that respected provider realities and incentivized the growth that New Mexico families, communities, and businesses want to see. All accepting childcare subsidies received an average of about a 20% increase in their rate. And again, as I mentioned, we created that enhanced rate, which is even higher. And that's an important decision point. It's not a one-size-fits-all mandate. It's a tool, one more lever to support workforce stability and meet family needs, while still respecting that providers operate different business models and serve different communities. And here's what we saw as we built this. When you stabilize the funding and raise rates in a transparent way, providers begin to do what they want to do. They expand, they recruit, and they serve more families. That's not a theory, it's what we're actually seeing here in New Mexico. Now I can share it. Let's talk about the real rocks, big rocks, and what it takes to make universal real, not just through legislative. Supply building, both the physical brick and mortar as well as our early childhood professionals that are needed when you expand access. The importance of compensation and professional supports to support the recruitment, but also the retention of that workforce. Absolutely, you need sustainable funding. You need a system that works for providers and families and early childhood educators. And ultimately, we have to improve child outcomes. We know that is the reality, the promise, and the gift of early childhood. So I'll just talk about each of those very briefly. Workforce, as you all know here on this meeting, this call today, this event, this celebration, is that workforce is the backbone of achieving quality. Widely accessible childcare access only works if we have early childhood educators who are able to staff the classrooms and expand supply. Since we started in 2020, New Mexico's childcare workforce has grown by 64%, while the national workforce has declined. Median childcare wages in New Mexico have risen 65%, the fastest growth in the nation. I think these are the outcomes that we're seeing as a result of our system building approach using the cost modeling as a key lever. Higher wages are essential to the recruitment and retention of stable classrooms. We've invested in training and scholarships, career pathways, making early childhood a profession, not a job. We're honest about the remaining challenge. To meet universal childcare, we must have an additional 5,000 early childhood professionals statewide. So we're growing that workforce. 23 of our 42 New Mexico higher education institutions offer early childhood credentials and degrees. And from 2020 to 24, we've seen certificate completion and higher ed completion increase by 15%. Our state's largest community college alone has about 900 students currently pursuing early childhood credentials or degrees. The combination of stabilizing the current workforce, growing the pipeline, is helping make universal childcare a reality. The other important fact is that by making those wages higher, we have our workforce solutions department, which works with our workforce boards. We are now considered a high demand profession, and we're one of the professions that can be supported through registered pre-apprenticeships and apprenticeships. We've also been clear that compensation strategies must work together. We're improving compensation for early childhood professionals through multiple approaches, including, as I described, rate setting, but we also have pay parity and wage supplements. In fiscal year 25, we launched a pay parity program for infants and toddlers, thanks to the New Mexico legislature, and we've aligned their pay with similarly credentialed K-12 educators. Participants saw an average of a 30% increase in their wages, about $10,000 per year, and we're supporting nearly 200 infant and toddler educators currently. We paired these efforts with scholarships and coaching so educators can earn the credentials that qualify them for these higher wages. Because you can't recruit and retain educators in a fragile system, you recruit and retain educators in a profession where pay and pathways, training, and respect all align. In the 27 budget asked for the governor, we have asked for 57 million, 19 million a year over 3 years to implement a wage scale and career lattice. Because we know that if ensuring compensation investments reach the workforce, that they have the intended impact. We worked again with a cross sector of early childhood professionals from Head Start, early Head Start, pre-K, home visiting, childcare, and we created this framework. And we're now going to tackle together with another cross-sector group, how do we administer it? How do we track credentials? How do we create policies for credit for prior learning, credit for prior experience? I now want to talk to our strategies around actually building the brick and mortar that we need. We know that we have a gap of about 12 to 15,000 spaces for young children to grow and learn and develop. So from the get-go, universal childcare meant supply building. And for us, that had two parts. The brick and mortar part, of course, we talked about the workforce, but the brick and mortar part, the governor put $13 million into a low interest loan so that community-based childcare programs could get access to capital. We partnered with our New Mexico Finance Authority for low interest loans, as low as 2% for them to open a business or expand their business. Demand has been overwhelming. 113 applications received in the first round and totaling $116 million, more than 9 times the available funding. Thank goodness the governor has put in another $20 million, a request for $20 million for the coming year. Demand has been so amazing. We've funded already 9 projects, almost 1,000 slots, of which about 600 will be infant and toddler slots. So again, you can see the momentum. Providers will expand when the system is stable and predictable enough to justify expansion. From the start, we prioritize data to inform our policies, our measures of success, and drive accountability. We know that quality matters, and research shows that it does drive outcomes. In 2025, we partnered with our public education department and the UCLA Center for Healthier Children, Families, and Communities so that we could measure at the community level how young children are doing as they enter kindergarten. The measure is truly a measure of how well the 0 to 4 system has supported children and families. We describe this as our first in the nation step at statewide scale. The kind of measurement matters because universal access has to lead to improved outcomes, not just higher enrollment. And we pair that data infrastructure with outcome measures that we can communicate clearly. For example, child well-being is strong in New Mexico. A recent report showed that 81% of New Mexico children 0 to 5 are flourishing. I love that word. They're happy, they're creative, they're joyful. And that's according to this recent report by the United Health Foundation. We've seen other encouraging trends in health indicators. Infant mortality moving from 5.9 deaths per 1,000 births in 22 to 4.4 in 2023, and declines in the share of children with 2 or more adverse early childhood experiences. On readiness, that early development instrument that we did in partnership with our public education department, 70% of kindergartners are developmentally on track across key domains, and early literacy is trending up. End of year kindergarten reading proficiency rose from 37% in 23-24 to 50% in school year 24-25. And third grade reading proficiency improved as well. These are the kind of outcomes that help sustain public trust and keep policy durable across time. Now, one question I get asked a lot, especially from leaders outside New Mexico, is how do we sustain this? In New Mexico, we built long-term, stable, and predictable funding for early childhood programs and protection from budget cycle uncertainty through the Early Childhood Trust Fund and additional long-term investments. The trust fund was created in statute with an additional investment of $320 million of general fund dollars and receives additional deposits from oil and gas and federal mineral leasing. Initially, the department would receive 5% of the corpus of this fund, or 30 million, whichever was greater. And then when we all saw post-COVID and the expansion and the explosion of oil and gas, we saw exponential growth in this fund. Driven by these sustained deposits and investment growth, the fund now sits just around $10 billion, and the department receives about $500 million annually through that distribution. To support universal childcare, the House Appropriations Finance Committee is actually looking at tapping into more of that fund. The Early Childhood Trust Fund is a central pillar for that sustained and predictable investment in early childhood programs prenatal to age 5. We have benefited also from broad public alignment. In November 2022, New Mexicans had the chance to vote to say, should we spend a portion of our land grant permanent fund on early childhood education? Overwhelmingly, 70% of New Mexicans said yes. So we now have a constitutional amendment that directs substantial funding to early childhood programs from our state's permanent fund. But we didn't wait for perfect funding conditions before we started building. We built the political will and the case over time. And I say we, and it was before me, so it was a lot of New Mexicans, and they were early childhood professionals working in classrooms, working with advocacy groups, working with legislative leaders. They were families. When we got that 70% of the vote, it was because families and early childhood professionals and advocates did door knocking all over the state. And the governor put her support behind that effort, and the legislature helped get it across the finish, helped get the referendum on the ballot. So we built the political will and case over time. We put bold ideas on the table. We built partnerships inside and outside government, so we were ready when any door or window opened. And that's important for any leader listening who's thinking, we can't do this, we don't have New Mexico's revenues or the funding picture. But you do not need to replicate our exact funding sources to replicate the system building approach. What you do need is that durable strategy, aligned partners, build the case, fix the funding logic, establish what quality care costs, and what it's costing your state to continue operating without it. Invest in the workforce and tie it all to outcomes. Maintaining universal access requires transparent budgeting and clear communication. Our child care budget reflects what it takes to maintain universal access, grow and professionalize the workforce, and stabilize and also help the child care sector thrive and fulfill our statutory obligations. We've asked for $160 million more in our 27 budget for child care as essential to provide the certainty and the confidence required for the sector to continue its growth trajectory, to meet the demand for working families and communities. We also describe the scale of the investment. It's projected to serve 56,800 children, 24,000 more children than we're currently serving. And with a combination of state and federal funds, will be a little over $600 million for an investment in childcare. When we communicate these figures, we also communicate why. Communities across our state are counting on us to deliver. Universal only matters if it's realized statewide. We also communicate on the return on investment in ways that resonate broadly. I cannot tell you the hundreds of families that we have received the most heartfelt and compelling messages from. And some of them are so simple. You've changed my family's life. You've given us choice. You've actually, in some cases, they say, you've saved my life. These are true hardships families are experiencing all over our country. And here in New Mexico, we've been able to hear directly from them. And we're here committed to deliver on our promise of a true universal system. This is not just an early childhood argument. That's an economic development argument. It's a public health argument. It's an education argument. Now let me talk about what made the politics work. At its core, regardless of where you are working, it's going to take process, partnerships, and definitely persistence. We built regular touch points in communication with advocates, business leaders, and philanthropy. We focused on our shared priorities and alignment of strategies. We also worked to address administrative barriers tied to equity issues, and we were always intentional about how we framed the policy. We framed childcare as a foundational to child development and school readiness. We emphasized that early educators do highly skilled work that deserves compensation, reflecting their values and their competencies. And we kept our messaging integrated. These investments boost outcomes for children and families, support early childhood professionals, and strengthen the economy. That integrated framing matters because it allows different stakeholders to see themselves in the solution. Education leaders see readiness and early literacy. Business leaders see the workforce stability and productivity. Families see affordability and opportunity. Legislators see outcomes and returns. And providers see stability and respect for the true cost of quality and the care and education that they deliver every day. What I want to shift now to is just the most practical parts of these remarks, which is if you are a state leader trying to move to universal access or trying to stabilize your childcare at scale, I offer 5 lessons from our experience. 1, start with a system building approach, not a single program. If early childhood is managed in separate lanes with separate rules, your ability to scale will always be limited. Unify your strategy, align goals, create a single place, a single table that can set direction across access, quality, workforce, and accountability. Fix the revenue equation before you promise the outcomes. If rates are built on what families can afford, your system will stay fragile. Cost modeling gives you a defensible framework for rate setting and long-term investment, and it gives providers a foundation for planning. And importantly, do it with providers, not to providers. Lesson 3, expand access and stabilize providers at the same time. Expand access because this is necessary. If you expand access and the providers don't have enough revenue, then we create the bottlenecks. If you raise the rates without addressing supply and access, you put a cap on how far those quality investments and how much the sector can grow. Pull all the levers at the same time. That's the New Mexico lesson. Lesson 4, make universal access possible, real with workforce and supply building. As I said earlier, our early childhood professionals are the backbone of this entire system. And professional development and workforce support are essential if you want universal to be true in every community. Lesson 5, build accountability into the system from day one. Prioritize data to inform your policy and to measure your success. Invest in readiness measurement and outcomes, and use that data to make targeted community level investments. Because the long game is not, quote, we expanded eligibility, but the long game is, did children do better? Did families do better? Did educators stay? Did providers stabilize? And did communities strengthen? I'll close with this. In New Mexico, we've worked hard to build an ecosystem, one that grows, adapts, and thrives, something that lasts for generations, and something that keeps universal access strong and sustainable over time. We're proud of what we built. We're proud of the strong coalition work that's been established, and we're proud of the progress we've made in lifting up our early childhood workforce. We're proud of the outcomes that are moving in the right direction, and we are very clear-eyed that universal is not a finish line. It is a commitment to keep listening, going to communities, hearing the pain points and their solutions, and building policy and programs that match the real needs in people's lives. A commitment to keep investing in quality access and workforce and to protect that work from budget cycle uncertainty. And a commitment to keep earning public trust through improved outcomes. So here's my invitation to you. Take what is useful from New Mexico and adapt it to the Louisiana context. Build the coalition now, which I know you already have. Go Far, Louisiana, and so many others. I'm so impressed and proud of what Louisiana also is doing. Put your bold ideas on the table. Build the political will and the partnerships now so you're ready when those windows and doors of opportunity open. Because early childhood education and care is not optional. It is the foundation of education. It's the foundation of health. It's the foundation of our economic security, and not just for families, but also for communities and for your entire state. And when we frame it as infrastructure, when we fund it, govern it, and measure it like infrastructure, we create the conditions for children to thrive and for communities to grow stronger. Thank you for your leadership in Louisiana. Thank you for the opportunity to share our story, and I look forward to learning from you and answering your questions. I think now I'm going to turn it back to Libby Saunier with the Louisiana Policy Institute.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I feel like we just had so many words of nuggets that we can take in our context here in Louisiana, particularly that, universal is not a finish line.
Mm-mm.
It's a commitment. It's a
Exactly.
commitment to stay in community, to stay engaged. And that listening that y'all started so many years ago is a continual process, which is so exciting to hear. So now we are going to move to question and answers. I've gotten many texts, you all. So I'm going to ask you is please post your questions in the comment sections of the platform you're viewing from, whether it's Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or LinkedIn. Put it in there, and we will get to those questions now. And we are so fortunate to have Elizabeth with us today. So let's get going, because I know there's some comments and questions that I've seen come through. All right. We're seeing thank you. Everybody's enjoying what was shared. Well, I'll kick one that we just got from Patrick Moore in Alexandria, Louisiana. He texted me, so he gets the first one because we didn't quite get on the ticker. He wants to know, he would love to know if you all track parents into where they improve their life, working full-time, back to school, if you're able to track that type of metric within the system.
Absolutely, and such a great question. We do an annual family survey, and I wish I had it at my fingertips, but everything is improving. So we started this. We're about to release our 5th year in a row. And when we had our strategic plan, we said one of our key measures is going to be, how do families think we're doing? Do they know about these programs? If they're using the programs, are they satisfied with the programs? And what has their impact been? And overwhelmingly, year over year, we're seeing families say their well-being has improved because of access to childcare. Childcare directly has definitely improved families' lives. And we have something called, and maybe some of you can come on and be proud partners of Universal Childcare on our website. And so families will post these amazing messages. But we do have that annual survey, and it's on our website. You can see all the years. And again, we're about to release our 5th one. And we're hopeful that in that we're going to see even more progress and importance of how families have been directly, their lives. I mean, one family said to me, I now can have a normal life because I'm not so stressed about this cost of childcare. And so, yes, thank you for that question. And we do measure that.
Fantastic. And if we think about parents under stress, if you can release any of that, what those impacts happen in their home and daily lives is really meaningful. Sonia Joseph, who is a childcare owner in New Orleans, asks, can you share what the rates of pay that you have for providers? You mentioned it in your talk.
Yes. So we have 5 levels of quality here. And so I can, in my head, I know I have the infant rate for a 5-star center is $2,175 a month. We pay based on enrollment, and we pay monthly, and we pay very timely. We're working on paying prospectively. So we pay at the beginning of the month. That won't come into play until May. And then at that enhanced rate, if you're agreeing to pay your staff entry-level wage of $19 an hour and stay open 10 hours, the monthly rate for an infant and 5-star is $2,500.
Thank you for that. Senator Beth Mizell made a comment. She saw you and visited with you in Savannah, but just wanted to say thank you again for being here today. And really, she enjoyed your wisdom and planned to use some of those bold ideas you shared with her then and then today as well. Your team, thankfully, are posting consistently on Facebook for us too about the findings of the reports and the surveys that you all do. So everybody, please take a look so that we can continue to learn from New Mexico as well. And you'll see the link to the provider rates too. So that's really important. Excellent. We had another question that came in around what are the key factors and partnerships that help build this statewide movement to get you to the universality, even though we know it's a commitment, not an endpoint.
Exactly. I would say there were a number of strong advocacy groups that work together. And our current Speaker of the House, Javier Martinez, was then the House leader, along with now Senator Mo Maestas, but who was also in the House at the time, who were champions in the legislature. And I would say that even former Governor Martinez, I mean, early childhood has been a commitment in New Mexico, but it did take the early childhood educators in the classroom, the owners, operators, but also families coming together through a number of organizations across the state that intentionally reached out to those audiences and those constituents and brought them together under a very broad coalition that worked, doggedly year after year. They had to actually work so hard that the person who was head of the chairman of the Senate Finance, who actually, the late John Arthur, who created the Early Childhood Trust Fund, he would never hear the bill about the land-grant permanent fund. And so these advocates actually went into community and ran some candidates and were able to unseat him, which allowed the land grant to pass in the Senate. So it was a lot of advocacy, but also strong legislative leadership and strong executive leadership. And that's what I like about New Mexico. It is all three. We are politically aligned, but it wasn't always that way. So.
Well, that kind of leads us to our next question from Daphne, who is one of our advocacy partners from Save the Children Action Network here in Louisiana. Her question is, I'm curious to know how you all strategically handled the opposition.
Yes, I think it was before my time, and I think it was working in coalition and making sure that, the governor did not throw her support right away behind the land grant because she knew that would be a no-go with the former Senator John Arthur, chairman. But I think it's just that you have to always be, have to be constantly working in your coalitions. And I know we have SCAN, the Save the Children Action Network, is part of our coalition. Something we introduced this year was meeting every week with the 19 different organizations that care about early childhood. And that's sometimes hard to bring everybody into alignment because they can be one issue, but we have to be thinking at a system level because the system is what's going to sustain the momentum and achieve the outcomes that we all want. So I think that's something for advocates and stuff to remember, that you need the executive, absolutely. You need the legislature, and they need to hear your voice, but you have, thinking system wide and not just in a one issue, I think is what helped us here in New Mexico.
Absolutely, because the system is going to outlive any one person.
Exactly.
And when you build it right and with the infrastructure, we really can go far. I'm going to make a quick plug for our Ready Louisiana coalition that we have here in Louisiana. It is just about increased investment in early childhood education. And it is now over 200 organizations strong, from economic developers to United Ways to nonprofits and elsewhere. And so that coalition, along with our Go Far Louisiana, which is about the early childhood systems piece, really have been important to how we think about how do we ensure that young children and their families are thriving. We had a question about what did the process look like for engaging oil and gas companies in securing their support?
Yeah, that's so interesting. So where we've been engaging their support now is that part of our state where the Permian Basin, where most of the oil and gas comes from, is a significant childcare desert. It's been identified as the area most in need. So we've been partnering with many of those leaders. They actually the governor held a childcare summit at her residence in December to talk about, we brought together local leaders, big industry sector, Chevron was there to talk about how do we work together across school districts, counties, municipalities, state, and childcare operators and providers, most importantly, to build this supply. And so they've been very supportive, and they're helping us really push the universal childcare message, because we need these rates to be funding all the children, not just some of the children, so that the childcare providers can flourish.
Absolutely. And we are lucky to have Chevron in the state and some other oil and gas companies. So that is a poignant question that was asked. So thank you for that. We have Stacy B. in New Orleans from It Takes a Village Academy. Are there any considerations or additional resources or funding for centers as they work to become and maintain nationally accredited in your system?
We do not have direct support for that, but we do recognize now we added, actually as part of our expansion of universal Montessori to our list. I think it's now 8 Well, Montessori has 2 different accrediting, so it might be 9 accrediting pathways to 5-star. So that's how we support it because of people, but we don't support the direct accreditation. We have our own quality system, which is at no cost to providers that can also get them to 5-star.
That's helpful. Thank you. Monique Rouge, who is a childcare owner in the greater New Orleans area, asked a question around as federal funding fluctuates, which it can, what guardrails do you all have in place to keep childcare providers from bearing the risk?
Good question. Most of our childcare budget is state money. So in some ways that is, and we have, again, a committed legislature and a committed executive to making sure that our childcare sector grows. So I would say that I think it's by making more significant state investments and by having the communities so involved. And our early childhood providers are very involved at the legislature and advocating. They have a very strong voice here in the state. But it's a good question.
It is, and we have the flip in Louisiana. The majority of our early childhood budget is with our federal dollars. So it makes it for why we
one thing I would say is that I've realized, because we only have a couple legislators who understand childcare. And so it's been a little intense trying to educate people about this very eclectic and diverse mixed delivery system and all of its components, and get big budget items through. So there's a lot of misunderstanding. So I'd encourage people in the childcare sector to run for office. I think I would, being at that event in Savannah, seeing these legislators who had that background, what they're able to bring to the conversation. We have one woman, Representative Dow, who started a childcare program, and she's a Republican, and we don't agree on everything, but she's sponsoring one of our bills, and I stay in close contact with her because she's the only one who can really translate to her colleagues what we're talking about in terms of ratios and group size and why we need 0 to school age, and why are we funding school age? They go to school, and okay, the before and after. So we both need more parents with young children, and we need people who work in the childcare sector to be in our legislatures. I think that will help a lot.
Y'all heard that here at Early Ed to run for office.
Yes, please.
We need you. Another question that came through is, how were families and childcare providers meaningfully engaged in shaping the design and implementation of the system?
Yes. Again, we have something we did also fund. We're called Local Early Childhood System Building Coalitions. We have 18 of them across the state. We cover about 14 of our 33 counties. And so they bring people together at the local level, and then we meet regularly with them once a month, either virtually or in person. And they do strategic plans, and they're telling us, this is what our community needs. This is what people, and then we travel. Again, we travel the state. Anytime we're doing like the wage scale, when we have an advisory council that is phenomenal, and 4 subcommittees. We just had 115 people apply to be on those subcommittees. So mostly they're providers, they're families, and they're also business and philanthropy leaders. So this is super committed to this. It's either from my early days of Head Start, where you're always listening to community and thinking about what does my community need, and knowing that in a state this big, we can't sit here in Santa Fe and think we know what it is. So we listen. We do community calls every month. We make sure that we have topics. We have time for Q&A. When we first started during COVID, we met every day from 8 to 9 virtually. And that was that kind of got us started in being connected and making sure that we're, as I said earlier, listening was an implementation strategy.
So you've been really good about saying the listening and how that impacts you and your team at the state level. How do you, as a follow-up to that question, because it was embedded, how does it, centering those voices, how does that help the policymakers understand what's happening too?
Well, I think it's because we can tell through, we communicate through their voice. They also come and join us and communicate directly. We have an early childhood day at the Roundhouse every year. And through our rulemaking, we do have a lot of authority in the executive to make things happen. I don't have a board over my department, but through the rulemaking process, we had about 120 providers from across the state provide very thoughtful and in-depth feedback that actually changed what our rates were. The governor had to go in for a bigger ask to the legislature because the provider community came out strong. They came out strong on some of the other rules that we had put in place. They felt we were overreach. So we made compromises, and it is through rulemaking, it's through our advisory councils that they actually help shape the policies the department is implementing.
And one of the things you and I talk about often when I get to see you is we don't want to do things to people. We want to do things with people. And that is evident in how you all listen and do the rulemaking and think about how you interact with your elected officials. So bravo. And thank you again for being with us today. We are just, what a way to kick off the month for us. So,
I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much again. And also Dr. Brumley and Devonda, thank you for joining us for today's keynote address. And thank you to everyone who took time out of their busy schedules first thing on a Monday morning to join us for today's program and the subsequent questions. We're looking forward to a month full of virtual programming in recognition of Early Ed Month. Throughout the month, we're co-hosting regional events for elected officials and business leaders with local leaders from the community across Louisiana. And so on Thursday, February 12th, we invite you to show some love by participating in a social media day of action. We'll be sharing social media toolkits with you following today's event, so you can learn how to join in the social media day of action. We're also going to have parent advocacy. On Thursday, February 19th at 6 p.m. Central, we invite all parents and guardians or anyone who wants to learn how to advocate for Louisiana's youngest learners. So join us for Louisiana Early Ed Month Parent Advocacy Training on the 19th at 6 p.m. Central. Next, we're going to share our parent poll. So on Tuesday, February 24th at 11 a.m. Central, we invite you to join our Policy Institute and parents as we discuss our annual parent poll survey findings that focus on the childcare arrangements of Louisiana families, including their needs and experiences related to childcare. I would also like to take a moment to thank all of our Early Ed Month sponsors. Your endless support allows us to continue to advance policies to ensure that Louisiana's youngest children are ready not only for success in school, but fundamentally in life. For details on how to tune into this month's programming and to learn more about early childhood education in Louisiana, please follow us on social media at Policy Institute LA or visit our website at policyinstitutela.org. Again, thank you for being with us today as we kick off the 2026 Early Ed Month.